Good day traders, this is Stefanos on behalf of Tixee, and in today's video we'll be giving a look back of the market for the week of the 5th until the 8th of August. Now, as with last week, the highlights for this past week were of course still the earnings reports from some of the world's largest corporations. Just to name a few, now in the intro we had Alibaba, AMD and PayPal as well. With regards to the stocks front, now as far as the Forex front, we of course had the all-important Nfp report, which takes place on the first Friday of each month. Seeing as how we just started with August, then obviously we had the Nfp report this past Friday. For now, with the disclaimer, as always, please note that all of the ideas discussed in the webinar are my opinions and do not make up for any form of investment, trading advice, neither any recommendations to buy or sell. You should always do your own research and due diligence before buying or selling any securities, financial products or instruments, and whether you use any kind of trading strategies. Any information that relates to past performance is not indicative of future results. So starting with stocks. As we mentioned, we're still within the earnings season and we're still going to be within the earnings season for the next couple of weeks as well. So this, you're going to notice, it has already become more of a recurring thing for the last couple of webinars. Now this past week, as we said during the intro and as we mentioned during the outlook of last week, we had up to 3,500 stocks reporting their figures, which, like we said, it also happens to be some of the world's largest corporations. Now the ones that reported their earnings and the ones that you can also find on Tixee's platform here, I'm gonna go over the full list because it was just a few of them, but we had Alibaba, like we said, AMD, PayPal, Caterpillar, British Petroleum, Uber, Moderna and eBay. So as we can see, it's quite a few of them that could have been taken advantage of. But the point that I want to make here, obviously we're not going to go over all of them one by one. We're going to cover a few of them. But the point is just to essentially understand what kind of impact these reports can have to the respective stock prices and the trading opportunities that they can create. So I'm going to pull up the chart for Uber first, so you can have it in front of you as we go over these stocks. Now, when I say that these reports are quite important, just to clarify, I don't just mean the headline figures. I don't just mean what the actual EPS figure is going to be in comparison to the estimate and what the actual revenue figure is compared to the estimate as well. Of course, don't get me wrong, those figures are still quite important, but it's not just the only type of element that we want to be paying attention to when it comes to the earnings report of a particular company. If I want to compare it, let's say, to the FOMC meeting minutes, so what happens usually is you're going to have the interest rate announcement of the figure itself, so by how much you're expected to hike the rates or decrease them, and shortly after, usually it's going to be half an hour later, you're going to have the press release from the FOMC committee, which they're going to give their comments as to what the roadmap is with regards to the future rate hikes and the overall economic outlook as well. So a similar scenario takes place with earnings as well, in the sense that we have the figures release, and shortly after, or usually at the same time, we're gonna get the release from the company, the press release, just making comments with regards to what they think the performance of the company is gonna be in the near future. So if we look at Uber as an example, now the company missed its EPS estimate by close to 400%. I'll show you how you can also find this. Let me just remove the indicators for now. And I'm gonna pull Uber here. TradingView, you can use it not just for charting, but they also have, you can use it just to see the earnings results, which is what I use it mostly for. So you can see we had the earnings on the 2nd of August, and it was in the pre-market hours. And you can pretty much see here the expected figures, the estimate, and by how much the surprise was. So you can see it missed it by almost 400%, but they did beat the revenues by close to 10%. Now, coming back to Tixee's platform, and you can pretty much see the impact that this had. Now, some people are going to think, well, okay, it missed the EPS by 400%. Shouldn't it be dropping? You could assume that, But like I said, it's important to pay attention to the press release, because what was mentioned in the press release is essentially that they were confident that they're going to be seeing even further international expansion based on their Q3 bookings. So because of that, obviously that was a pretty positive article that came out. It has a pretty positive tone with regards to Uber's outlook. And as we can see here, so they had the earnings release, and it was in the pre-market hours, so the impact was seen on the on the same day. So it gapped up, as you can see, it was a pretty huge gap up from the previous day. And in the days following the release, it actually surged by as much as 30%. So before the earnings, the previous close was round about, let's just round it up to $25. Let's just say here. And shortly, in the 4 days following the release, it went all the way up to 32. So it was almost a $10 increase in comparison to let's say the beginning of the week. So it was a quite strong movement. And again, despite the fact that we had a pretty mixed earnings report, with the EPS missing the estimate by a whole lot when comparing it to the revenue estimate. Now, so as you can see, it's not just pure black and white. Okay, it missed this by more than the other figure, so it should go down. No, you need to pay attention to the press releases that are released afterwards and what the company officials have to say with regards to the company's outlook. Now, if we want to cover one more stock from the list, we can go over AMD as well. Now, AMD was a little more straightforward, so switch back to TradingView just to pull up, just to see the earnings. So we can see here that it pretty much beat both of them. It wasn't by a huge margin, but obviously the fact that it beat both of them was in itself pretty positive. And when we go back onto the chart, we can see that we did have the earnings report, and we gapped down slightly lower, but nevertheless, I mean, obviously with by the fact that we had both of the estimates being beaten, we can see in the days following the release, prices actually surged, and they went by as much as 4%. So they gapped down opening roundabout at 95, and now they're all the way up to 102, 103. If we look at this candlestick, which was the last close, it was 102.3. So again, this was a little more straightforward, but not all of the reports are obviously going to be like this. Just a little bit of a reference for next week. Obviously, we're going to cover this in the outlook as well. But if you thought that we've had many stocks reporting their numbers on the past couple of weeks, just wait for next week, because we're actually going to have more than 5,000 companies reporting their figures. So yeah, this was with regards to stocks. Now, going on to Forex, and as we said, we had the Nfp report earlier today while recording this webinar. Now, the actual figure for the expected figure for the Nfp reports, it was saying that it was expected to show a creation of 250,000 jobs, but the actual figure came in at more than double, showing an increase of 528,000 jobs being created. And the unemployment rate also fell by 0.1% from 3.6 to 3.5. And we can see pretty much the NFP is like the earnings, but like for Forex in a way, because if we look at, let's say, the two most liquid pairs, so we'd say euro dollar and the pound dollar. So we'll look at the euro dollar first. I'll switch this on to the 30-minute. And not even by going over it, I'm pretty sure you can already tell which candlestick was the release of the NFP figure. And yeah, you're right, it was pretty much this one. The euro dollar at the time of the release fell by 0.73% or 74 pips in a span of just 30 minutes. And if we look at the pound dollar, it's probably going to be more or less the same. Again, without saying anything, you can pretty much tell we even have a pretty strong gap down from this price level, because obviously it was a highly volatile event. So you can expect to see these kind of gaps. And it fell by 0.94, so even more than the euro dollar, or 114 pips at the time of the release. So again, this shows the kind of impact that the NFP report can have with regards to currencies. If we also want to look at the dollar index, since we're covering currencies as well, we're going to see it had a pretty good bounce from the last 2 weeks, because the last 2 weeks closed in the red. So it pretty much made up all the losses from the previous week, and it's now looking like it could even pair the losses from 2 weeks prior. So yeah, definitely we can see that it's been in a pretty strong uptrend ever since June 2021. So pretty much a year ago, that's when the uptrend began, and it hasn't looked back ever since. And on to commodities, looking at oil itself, you can see the chart in front of you. We can pretty much see with the strong dollar as well as a strong Nfp report, at the time of the release, oil prices fell, and they actually fell by 1.05% or 95 cents at the time of the release, which it may not sound a lot, but again, it obviously depends by how many contracts you're trading at the time, if you're trading this particular event. If I switch this onto the weekly time frame, again, we pretty much see the impact of a stronger dollar that it had on oil prices, since they pretty much fell even more, this time by staggering 10% or $9.87. So you can see it's trying to slowly claw its way back down into levels at the beginning of 2022 and even before that as well. So definitely interesting to see, because this, I would say, was also a pretty key level, because we had a pretty strong bounce from this area here, whereas on this occasion it did have a pretty good rejection here, but it didn't hold. It traded sideways for the next 2 weeks, and it's like it was waiting for the oil inventory report just to pierce through that level. So it's going to be interesting next week for sure, whether it's going to be a retest and further drop, or if it's going to actually pare back all those losses and continue moving higher. And lastly, we'll be moving on to gold as well. Switch it on the 30-minute just to see the impact of the NFP. So you can see it's pretty much looking like you're looking at the euro dollar or the pound dollar. At the time of the release, the gold prices fell by 1.09% or close to $20 during the Nfp report. But if we switch this onto the weekly time frame, prices, you'll see that they did move slightly higher on the week. This was pretty much the third consecutive green week. I would assume it also has to do with the fact that we had Nancy Pelosi's visit in Taiwan, which obviously escalated tensions on a geopolitical level, since China did warn the US, or Nancy Pelosi specifically, not to go ahead with the meeting, which she did do so in the end. And pretty much China declared they're going to be doing military exercises off the coast of Taiwan, which obviously you can imagine what kind of narrative we had over the next couple of days in terms of a potential conflict between China and Taiwan, something similar to what happened with Ukraine and Russia. So yeah, definitely it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks for gold as well, seeing as how we might get further developments as to the military exercises of China close to Taiwan. And yeah, there you have it. This is as far as the look back and review for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video and you found it useful, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Until then, trade safe.